The Cadillac F1 team should be making its track debut in less than a year, but its 2026 entry still hasn't been confirmed. Given the rocky road travelled by the proposal formerly known as Andretti, the drawn-out process of getting its 2026 entry finalised shouldn't be a surprise. Nothing has been simple about making this team a reality. There's been radio silence ever since F1 announced in November 2024 that it had reached an agreement in principle with the massive American car manufacturer General Motors to support its bid to enter under the Cadillac brand. It's seemingly been left in limbo, but the proposal is in the final stages of approval by the FIA for a second time and is expected to be granted a definitive entry for 2026, perhaps even before the 2025 season begins. The original rejection by F1 on commercial grounds came despite getting a first green light by the FIA, and F1's obviously had a change of heart since then. That's for a few reasons. General Motors is a bigger part of the project now, taking a stake in the team and definitively committing to building a works engine by the end of the decade. Michael Andretti's exit from his eponymous organisation was also key. Andretti Global is no longer in the picture, at least by name, as that's been replaced by TWG Global and comes under Andretti's former business partner Dan Tauris's oversight. Meanwhile, the UK-based company operating the team, Andretti Racing, was quickly renamed Cadillac Formula Racing. Plus, woven into all of this was the threat of action from a US federal investigation into the original rejection of GM and Andretti, which was subsequently dropped. The Andretti washing has ruffled at least a few feathers with those who dislike the way it's been handled, with 1978 F1 champion Mario Andretti the only named link in a non-executive director role, but there's no denying this has all created a smoother path. F1's agreement in principle didn't mean a final green light though, because it sent the entry back through a formal process with the FIA to review the revised proposal and check it still checked all the boxes. There's no reason to think it won't, and with that process nearing an end, it should get the final sign-off soon. Then Cadillac will finalise commercial terms with F1, which could take a little longer, but this shouldn't be an obstacle, with discussions already had over key matters like the de facto entry fee that Cadillac will have to pay. That's expected to be $450 million and will be shared among the existing 10 teams as compensation for the slice of prize money Cadillac will take away, plus the competition it will add for staff, sponsors, and things like that. Based on the fact F1 has been so supportive of the revamped project and seems to have a more collaborative relationship with its new leadership, this should all be a formality. Cadillac hasn't been sitting around doing nothing while this happened in the background. The team in the UK has been working on a baseline 2026 car for several months. Cadillac has been working as though it's all going to happen. In fact, one of the reasons it has a fighting chance of being ready to at least be respectable in 2026 is because just cracking on and expecting it will all get approved has been its attitude for a long time. Still, when final formal approval comes without any asterisk, it will be great news for those at Cadillac and progress will be most welcome. First, it'll draw a line under such a long saga. It's been just over a year since the previous iteration of this idea, when it was still operating under the Andretti Global name and headed by Michael Andretti, was formally rejected by F1, and it's 2 years since the Andretti Cadillac plan was first publicly announced. But time is the most precious commodity in F1 at the moment, with a massive rule change looming in 2026. So the longer Cadillac waits to get the green light, the more chance there is of any uncertainty impacting elements of its operations. Cadillac has already lost any advantage it may have briefly had in getting ahead on 2026 work. It has the joint highest aerodynamic development allocation in 2025, as its work was no longer unrestricted as of January the 1st. F1's original rejection of the entry had come with a silver lining for the team. It meant it was not subject to any of the regulatory restrictions that existed for wind tunnel testing or CFD work, or the ban on 2026 aero testing that other teams were under until January the 1st this year. Cadillac was also under no obligation to adhere to budget cap limitations, although, as with the theoretically unlimited aero testing possibilities, the size of the team naturally limits how much work can be conducted. That situation is different now. The aerodynamic testing restrictions allow the teams that finish lower in the championship to conduct more development work, and despite not having its entry greenlit, a condition of its agreement in principle last year is that Cadillac will be treated as an equal last team in 2025, at least as far as aerodynamic testing regulations are concerned. Along with Sauber, which finished last in 2024, Cadillac will get 115% of the baseline amount, and Cadillac stands for the whole year, while others will have theirs adjusted mid-season based on the championship positions at the end of June. That's 5 percentage points more than Williams when it comes to calculating their number of wind tunnel runs or CFD items, 10 more than Racing Bulls, and 15 more than Haas. All teams that Cadillac would, assuming it is targeting midfield respectability, like to be fighting when it enters F1 in 2026. Although Cadillac has had on paper a fantastic advantage for the last few months to conduct its testing without any limitation, existing teams are not exactly worried. First, the finalised technical regulations weren't set for most of last year, and Cadillac shouldn't have had access to what was being discussed. It would only have been able to work from the provisional rules that had been published, and a fair amount has changed since then. And while Cadillac will be subject to the same budget cap as others in 2025, that only rules out the most extreme benefits that could have been gained. For example, the team somehow having had the capacity to develop, build and extensively test a 2026 mule car. Where Cadillac will have a more tangible advantage is that its sole focus will be on the new rules in 2026, while its rivals are fighting a championship on track in 2025 and spending some development and money on the current season in the process. This means all of Cadillac's budget and aero testing can go towards 2026, where others will be split, but making use of that depends on having a team big enough and mature enough and access to the relevant facilities. Opposition teams therefore believe that Cadillac's had a small head start at best, which only mitigated the worst of how much work it has to do. One team boss told us it's a monumental task, and any advantage will balance out very quickly. The scale of the challenge facing Cadillac is huge, but led by team principal Graham Loudon, the former Virgin and Marussia team boss, and other sensible people with a lot of F1 knowledge, Cadillac has been proactive. To explain that and what they've prioritised, here's someone who knows Loudon and those in charge of Cadillac very well, our own Ed Straw.
This team has not wasted time while fighting the political battle to get an entry. By the end of last year, there were around 280 people working full-time on the project, most of those technical recruits. Now they're using a Toyota wind tunnel in Cologne. That was the one that McLaren until recently was using. They've got a Silverstone base as well. They've got a design office now that's roughly comparable in size to that of Haas. So that's doing all the aerodynamic work, all of the mechanical design work, the chassis design work you need to get on the grid and have half a chance of being respectable. They're doing all the right things. Incredibly tough job, but they're making the most of the time they have.
Joining Loudon in the Cadillac F1 leadership is highly regarded former Renault engine chief Rob White as Chief Operating Officer, former Renault F1 and Mercedes Formula E technical boss Nick Chester as Technical Director, and title-winning Benetton and Renault linchpin turned F1 Chief Technical Officer Pat Simmons as an advisor. Simmons finally started this year after a period of gardening leave. One team boss rather ungraciously claimed that this was not exactly a collection of formidable, success-laden senior personnel, with the implication being there's not much to fear. But there are two things to say about that. First, that's an arrogant attitude that could easily underestimate what Cadillac's been building. Second, this team needs a solid foundation, not title-challenging aspirations from the get-go, and there's no doubt it has recruited sensibly with a heavy focus on experience and pragmatism. There will also be some gains through Cadillac's Ferrari customer engine deal, which was confirmed last December. Though it's not going to be a Haas-style dependency, taking everything F1's rules allow, the arrangement will include a supply of gearboxes and rear suspension, which is a significant amount of work that Cadillac will not have to undertake itself. It plans to outsource a lot of its manufacturing initially. While that will be the foundation of the entry, Cadillac only intends to be an engine customer as an interim solution. General Motors originally targeted a 2028 debut for its own F1 engine, but now only says it will have that by the end of the decade. Were GM already preparing an engine for the next couple of years, it would, like the team itself, have benefited from a temporary period of no limitations while awaiting for an entry to be confirmed. Instead, it will be subject to engine development restrictions like other manufacturers. It won't have unlimited time and money to spend. But where this was previously a slightly nebulous commitment, it is now something more concrete. In January, Cadillac announced a spate of key details for its new engine program. That project will now be overseen by a new company called GM Performance Power Units, set up by GM and TWG Motorsports, which to all intents and purposes is what we were previously calling Andretti Global. Longtime GM engineer Russ O'Blenis, who is credited by GM for spearheading its race-winning Cadillac and Corvette hybrid engines in IMSA sports car racing, heads up the new company as president and CEO. The Cadillac project is to use a dedicated facility in North Carolina near GM's Charlotte Technical Center. The company says it's ramping up its team and hiring in all areas of the business, but the Ferrari customer deal will be in place until the F1 engine is ready to be raced. That will take a few years. The original target was 2028, but now the more vague by the end of the decade is being used as the timeline. and there are a lot more urgent, high priority things to accomplish before then just to get the team on the grid.